Thank you again, everyone, for coming. I am very pleased to have Maria Socolof here with us today. Um, Marie Sokoloff lives in Port Washington, Long Island. She was a competitive gymnast in college and had a successful 22-year career as an environmental health scientist. Then in 2005, she ruptured a disc in her neck when she rolled over in bed. Surgery and other conventional treatments failed to heal her. Years of de- debilitating myofascial pain followed. Finally, through mind body approaches and bewildering revelations, true healing began. In her memoir, The Invisible Key Unlocking the Mystery of My Chronic Pain, she shows us that one can heal even when hope is lost. Ms. Sokoloff holds a Master of Science degree in Environmental Health Sciences from the Harvard School of Public Health, and as she calls it, a Master of Pain from the School of Real Life. Please welcome Maria Sokoloff. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. I am going to do a share screen so I can show a presentation while I talk. Let me do that now. Okay, let me make that bigger. Okay, thank you for the introduction. This is me, and I'm just gonna jump right in. Since we're not live and I can't give you real milk and cookies, this is the best I could do, but grab a snack if you'd like, and let's begin. I'm going to make two parts of my presentation. The first is about my healing journey, and then I'll open it up to questions and answers after that. And then I'll talk about my writing process and again, have questions. First, I know there's a chat. I can't quite see the chat when I'm doing the presentation, but feel free to put anything in there I can look at later. I was going to ask if anyone here does have chronic pain. I'm sorry, I'm going to see if I can see the hand. I don't think I can do it all at once. Sorry. So anyway.
I can always let you know when there's questions.
Okay, okay, great. So I do know at least one person already mentioned that they've had myofascial pain for several years. So a lot of us can relate. So I wrote this story to share my healing journey and the positive results that I've come through. So as the introduction said, I ruptured a disc in my neck and I ended up having surgery after, well, let me jump back. I was completely healthy as far as I knew, an athlete. I was a competitive gymnast for 10 years, including through college. I had the perfect little life, my marriage and 2 kids and a career, and everything was great until I was 40 when I rolled over and ruptured a disc in my neck. Now, I didn't know that's what had happened at first, but I just knew I was in excruciating pain for a good 3 weeks before I even got an MRI to tell me that I had ruptured the disc. And at that point, I was already losing function of my left arm. And when I finally saw a doctor at that point, they said I needed surgery if I wanted the use of my arm for the rest of my life, which I did. So I had surgery. But after the surgery, I regained the function of my arm, but I was still having significant pain, and it was more on the other side of my neck, and just a little different feeling pain. It wasn't the shooting nerve pain that I had from the ruptured disc, but it was just burning, stabbing, jabbing, just miserable, debilitating pain. That was, for me, it was in my neck area, kind of then referring to my lower back and my head. But I could barely hold my head up for 10, 15 minutes at a time. I'd have to lie down. Medications weren't working. They tried to send me to physical therapy. I could hardly do anything. It was just making it worse. So this went on for nine months before I was finally diagnosed with chronic myofascial pain, or myofascial pain syndrome. And I was thrilled to at least have something acknowledged now that I had something wrong, because initially the surgeons were telling me, oh, just 1 more month, you'll be better, 1 more month, and I wasn't getting better. And I was just extremely miserable. And like I said, could barely hold my head up, could barely function. I was still trying to do some work. I was working at home, lying down. My kids were 4 and 10. Trying to, keep up with life was just nearly impossible. So once I got diagnosed with the myofascial pain syndrome, the doctor tried trigger point injections. Well, let me describe myofascial pain first. It's essentially, a lot of us know we have can get knots in our muscles from either tension or overwork or something. But it's sort of that on steroids. It's where it's so painful, even you don't have to touch them. They just hurt, and they can be anywhere in your body. Mine are located more in my upper back and neck and refer pain to my head. But like I said, there's trigger points, and those can refer pain and just be painful in and of themselves, even when you don't touch them. There are active trigger points which hurt just in and of themselves. Latent trigger points, or if you touch them, that'll hurt. And both of those can refer pain to different areas of your body. So when you have pain in your head, it might not be by fixing your head, it'll make it go away. It might be by working on those trigger points that are somewhere else in your body. So it's a little tricky. And it was odd. Had never heard of this before. My dad's a doctor. I went to a school of public health. I'd never heard of this before. And this was back in 2005 when my journey started. So I think myofascia is a much more common word now, but it's still not a well-known condition, but it's so prevalent, and it can be at such different levels of pain. You can have, just those knots that hurt and bother you, but they can be so debilitating. And like I said, I felt like I didn't say yet, but I sometimes felt like I had a soldering iron jabbing in my, in these trigger points, and just misery. So the doctor who diagnosed me with the myofascial pain syndrome was giving me shots and medications, and nothing was working still. So it wasn't until about 2 years into all this that I finally found relief. And it was through, I did my John Barnes myofascial release therapy. And before I actually did that, like I said, that was about 2 years into my journey. But before that, my mother actually sent me a book by Dr. John Sarno, and it is called The Mind-Body Prescription. And I read it, and it's about this mind-body connection and how our minds our emotions can affect our pain and cause pain, in fact, not just exacerbate it, which it also can, but he says that it really can cause pain. And as a scientist and an athlete and a very left brain linear thinker, this seemed a little odd and a little wacky to me. But at this point, I was desperate. I didn't know, nothing else was working that the doctors were telling me to do. So I read the book, and it made some sense to me that I could understand. For example, we know there are links between our emotions and physical responses. We're nervous, we get sweaty, and that's an emotion and a physical response. We're embarrassed, our cheeks flush. So again, an emotion, a physical response. So it's the same concept. So when he laid it out like that, I thought, well, this makes sense, and nothing else is helping me. So maybe there's something to it. So I had about 2 days of relief after reading his book, which was odd to me, but it didn't last. So I checked that off as another thing that I tried. Didn't work. Let's move on. And so after that, I had a friend mention the John Barnes myofascial release to me. So I read John Barnes's book, and again, made a lot of sense. He talks about how we hold tension in our muscles and in our body, and we have the myofascia is the lining around the muscles, sort of like when you buy a breast of chicken and you see that thin film around it. That's the myofascia. And in normal functioning body, it's fluid and helps you move and move easily. But when there's trauma or tension, it gets restricted, and it holds you in, and it's kind of like saran wrap when it's all crumpled up and you can't get it apart. It's more like that than something smooth. So once I learned about that, and I read the book and it made sense to me, I started getting the myofascial release treatment. And I first went to somebody locally. I was living in Maryland at the time, and Phil was the physical therapist who I saw there. And after about 3-4 months, I was making some progress and feeling a little better, getting a lot of range of motion back, but I still had hit a plateau. So after that, I went to an intensive of this therapy in Paoli, Pennsylvania. And that's where you go 3 sessions a day for multiple weeks. And I went for 2 straight weeks and did three sessions a day. And the point of it is try to get your body out of the stuck patterns that it's in. Essentially, like I said, the muscles are all knotted and tight, and the fascia is all tight around it. The myofascial release work is body work, and they kind of like a massage. They'll put their hands on different restricted areas of your muscles and your fascia, and slowly try to help you release it by just putting some light pressure. Not always so light, or it doesn't feel light when you're in so much pain. Any light touch really, really hurts. So they're very gentle to start, but it can get kind of intense, but it helps to release the tissue in there. So I'm going to read from, let's see, I'm going to read a little bit from the book about some of my myofascial release treatments. So this is the first one before I went to the Paoli, Pennsylvania intensive. This was with Phil. I'm going to switch glasses. Okay. I sat on the table with my head hanging in front of me as far as it would go. Phil was working on a trigger point in my back, and the pain went deep, as though it was penetrating my entire being. Intense pressure felt like the source of my daily suffering, the bottomless well from which my body tapped into my pain reservoir. Tears ran down my face. I wasn't exactly sure what was causing them, the simple fact that it hurt so much, or that my hypersensitive trigger point felt like it represented the previous 2 years of my life, constant pain and debility. In concert with the tears, my jaw started shaking. This is weird, I thought. I'm not doing this on purpose. I did, however, recall reading in John Barnes's book that this sometimes happens during treatment. At the end of the session, I said to Phil, "Wow, did you see my jaw shaking?" I figured if I focused on that, maybe I could ignore the fact that I'd been crying. Undoubtedly, it would have been fine to expose my emotions to Phil, but I wasn't ready to show such vulnerability and weakness. Even if Phil never would judge me, I perfected self-judgment and felt the need to avoid acknowledging my tears. After I mentioned my shaking jaw, Phil confirmed that he too saw that happen. Then, with a tone that indicated, "You can't hide anything from me," he said matter-of-factly, "And you got emotional as well." Oh, darn, he noticed. I'm sure he knew those tears were telling. They were signs of something beneath all my pain. I knew I was holding incredible reservoirs of sadness from the previous 2 years of pain and for everything I'd missed as a result, especially with the kids. At the time, however, I had no idea how much this was only the tip of the iceberg. So that was after a couple of months of seeing Phil already, and that was the first time there was any emotion that came up, and it was kind of unexpected, and I didn't know what it was all about. But then a month later, I went to this treatment in Paoli, Pennsylvania. So now I'm on my way there. I left Chevy Chase on a slightly overcast but pleasantly mild November morning. Soon the sky turned overwhelmingly gray, the surrounding air thick and foggy. Intermittent rain joined the dense fog as I drove into the unknown. On this ever so anticipated trip to Paoli, my trip to Mecca, I didn't know how to feel. I hoped I would come back changed, better. Maybe not all better, but at least somewhat better. Hopefully, significantly better. Day 1. The first session began with an initial evaluation. A therapist named Anna checked my range of motion and body symmetry. She asked me to list all my physical traumas. She explained that traumas and microtraumas add up to create fascial restrictions, which pull on the body in different ways and can affect pain patterns. When Anna began the treatment and placed her hands under my neck to feel for tightness in my underlying fascial tissue, a calm overtook my body. I felt myself relaxing, almost falling asleep. That is, until acute pain shot through my upper back and into my head when she pressed on an extremely tight trigger point. Pulled from my short-lived, almost dreamlike state, I tensed up. "Breathe into it," she said, noticing my increased muscle tightness. She explained that I should breathe deeply and focus my attention on the area that hurt, where the restriction was. That's supposed to help to soften the spot and hopefully allow it to release. "Oh, okay," I said. Well, I thought, yeah, whatever. It sounded a little hokey. How can focusing my attention to breathe in an area that's not in my lungs affect a tight muscle? Since I wasn't there to argue, I tried my best to comply. Like breathing through labor contractions, this at least helped divert my focus away from some pain. Through the deep, slow breathing, I tried to let my body relax. A difficult feat when someone is inflicting pain on you. As I lay there, grimly weathering this ordeal, I wondered again if this modality was going to work. But after 2 years, when nothing else helped, I had to give it a chance. As the session continued, Anna's hands remained on my body, sinking into my fascia. She asked about the history of my neck problems. It didn't take long before I got emotional. Just simply hearing myself say the word surgery in response to Anna's question made my voice quiver and my eyes water. With the therapist's hands applying pressure to my glue-like connective tissue, I described my neck operation. That's when the tears began in earnest. Anna encouraged me to cry or sob from the gut, not from the throat, which I must have been doing. She said it should come from my core, where I could really feel the emotion and release it from deep inside. Anna continued to follow the movement of my fascia with her hands. She asked, "What would you say to the surgeon?" I blurted out, "Be careful, it's my neck you're cutting." At that moment, I realized how petrified I'd been about having the surgery. I cried on and off as she worked on the irritated, restricted tissue in my neck and other places on my body. I found it very peculiar that memories, tears, or sadness surfaced. On that first day, throughout my 3 treatment sessions with therapists Anna, Carol, and Mel, the theme that continually returned to my consciousness was of being in the hospital. One therapist pressed her fingers into the tight trigger points in my neck. I felt a painfully strong tightness and pulling. Twice I experienced a razor-sharp sensation in my neck, but it only lasted for a second. Like the slice of a scalpel. Was it muscle memory from my surgery? As their hands found more restrictions in my body, I remembered the hospital room where I spent those miserable few nights after the surgery. The nurses not answering the call button, my arm swelling up from the misplaced IV needle, the feeling of not being able to breathe, being so scared. My emotions turned to anger. I was mad at the doctors for cutting me open. I was mad at the uncaring nurses in the hospital. These thoughts, which I hadn't acknowledged before, flowed through me as the therapists continued to treat my restrictions. I became acutely aware of the fear and anger I'd been holding on to. And somehow I was able to let my emotions run free. Maybe since I was away from anyone I knew in a safe, non-judgmental environment, I could let the tears flow easily. There was nothing to lose and maybe something to gain. So that was my first day in Paoli. And by the end of that, I had a dramatic reduction in pain. And that was not to be hyperbolic or anything, but that was what saved my life. And from then I went from about on a 10 scale of pain, I went in probably around a 7, 8 for those 9 months after the surgery. Before the surgery, it was a 10. But after Paoli, it was more in the 3 to 4 range. And that, even though I still had pain, that gave me my life back, essentially. So after that, I still had, and it's in the book, so I'm not going to go into the whole story, but after that, there was still some ups and downs and other things that happened. So, I had a new spike in pain. So the book covers a 5-year period from 2005 when I ruptured the disc to 2010 when I was hiking in Alaska and realizing I was actually living life again. And I thought I might never do that again. So that was the success story. But it's been more than 10 years since the end of the story. So I thought I would just cover in general all the things that I've tried over these years, because like I said, I made that amazing progress in Paoli, and that really started my recovery and my healing. But still trying to get to that last bit. I've tried a lot of other things. I've done a lot of things, and a lot of it has to do with self-care. And I have this slide here that I have different categories in these columns. And the first one is just traditional treatments that usually the doctors will first start out with, and it's oral medications, steroid injections. I was using lidocaine patches, and surgery and traditional physical therapy. And none of those. The surgery helped my ruptured disc, really the nerve problem, but it probably triggered the myofascial pain, and because that is a known trigger. Trauma like that, like surgery, can trigger myofascial pain. But not only physical traumas, but emotional traumas as well. And that's what I discovered in Paoli, that there was a lot more underneath my pain having to do with emotional traumas from childhood, as well as, they all build up over your lifetime. And especially when there's some from childhood, they're so deeply ingrained in your body that it's hard to reverse. But it's still, I made so much progress after being in Paoli that I know it's possible to heal. And even though it might take a long time to get the rest of it, like I said, I'm living life now, and it's just another world to be in than the one I was in for several years of not being able to function. But so this table just shows, I bolded all the things that I've done and that have helped me the most. Everything on this table is something I've tried, but the ones in bold are the ones I felt have been most effective. And again, the John Barnes myofascial release, the JFBMFR here, is what kickstarted really my true healing. But I've done all these other things, a lot of self-care, resting when needed. Writing was, I wrote this book, and that was a big part of healing as well, I believe. So these just give you an idea of some of the things that I've done, and that it's not easy. I guess the point is that it's not always one thing. Some people can just read a book on mind-body connection and years of pain can be erased very quickly, but that's often not the case for some of us. And this just shows that there's a lot of things sometimes we have to do and keep doing and trying to heal. And in general, my lessons learned from this journey is advocate for yourself. It's very hard when you're in pain. And so if you can find someone to help, but if not, just remember, if you don't trust the doctor is listening to you. I was lucky. I never had a doctor say it's all in your head. Even though a lot of this is mind related and it's from your brain, because your brain is trying to protect you and is doing things to protect you, but it affects your physical body. But for someone to say it's all in your head, like you're making it up, is devastating. And it happens to too many people. And I was lucky that that didn't happen to me. But nonetheless, so advocate for yourself. If you're not getting heard, find another doctor. Try to find a doctor who understands the mind-body connection, who understands integrative medicine, functional medicine, all these things where they're looking at the whole body, more holistic treatment than just looking at one section of your body and trying to treat that separately. Also, that the doctors don't know everything. Like I said, my surgeons didn't know what was wrong. They didn't know anything about myofascial pain, I guess. And I finally was referred to a physical medicine and rehab doctor who diagnosed me with the myofascial pain syndrome. But even so, he was giving me all the traditional treatments and it wasn't helping. I was the one that came to him and said, I want to try this myofascial release. And he said, oh, yeah, let's try that. So also listen to your body. I think pain is a message and it's telling us to stop and pay attention to what's going on, and something's wrong. Something needs attention, and both physically and emotionally. And when I realized how much the emotions were driving some of my chronic pain, I was blown away, but that's what started me to heal. So, and it, sort of such a simple thing, but it doesn't mean it's simple to heal from it, but simple to acknowledge and should be acknowledged. And again, the mind-body connection is real, like I described about your embarrassed red face or tense muscles. It's the same thing going on. It's just we're stuck in these subconscious patterns of fight, flight, or freeze, and our body, whether it was a trauma or even just all these emotions built up over time in life, they affect your physical body. And once you recognize that, you can start to repattern your brain. Our brains are neuroplastic, which means they can be reprogrammed, basically. And that's what we have to do. We have to reprogram our brains out of these stuck patterns of thinking they need to protect us. I think also, like after I ruptured the disc and I was in such acute pain for a month, my muscles were just holding as tight as possible to try to protect me from that pain. And I feel like it just got stuck in that. Plus, then there were all these past traumas I didn't know about that were underlying fears that I had. So basically, our bodies do have an innate ability to heal. And like I've said, once you recognize some of the other things that are going on, some emotions and traumas, or what have you, whatever it is, then you can really start to let go of those things and accept that is related to your pain. And then it starts to lift amazingly, is what I found. Also, that there's no quick fix to chronic pain, at least not for me, and that individuals respond differently to different options. And that's why it takes trial and error sometimes some people are more body learners. Some people are more, in their mind learners. So I felt like I understood that when I read John Sarno's book about the mind-body connection, it made sense, but it wasn't until I was in getting the body work and my body was releasing things that I mentally don't think I could have got there. It was just things stuck in my body that had a chance to get released when the physical therapists were working on me. So some of us just, have to process it in different ways. So that's why that table of all those different methods, you sometimes have to try different things and see what works for you. But I do believe, because I've experienced it, that you can greatly reduce or eliminate your pain, and to always maintain hope. It takes patience and perseverance, but it's possible. And really, to get to the source of the pain, don't just treat the symptoms. And never give up and keep an open mind. My two biggest pieces of advice, I guess. And then just to show, this table is, if somebody asks me, what should I try? What should I do if I've got chronic pain or myofascial pain? But this is true for a lot of chronic pain and other illness too, possibly. But and I titled this as non-invasive options. So there may be some other things that could be effective, but I think that's where one should start, because why invite anything invasive in, if these things work, and these are things that work, and in my opinion and in many people's experiences. And again, it's not like I can pick one thing and say, do this is going to work for you. Everyone's a little different. So for me, I still think the first thing to do is learn about the mind-body connection, and try not to be, I was skeptical. That's why, maybe that is why it took me 2 years to get there. I was not ready to accept that. I couldn't understand how that could even be. But if you're open-minded and understand, just think logically about how our body does have physical reactions to our emotions, that this can happen. This is true. So there's a lot of books. There's a website, this tmswiki.org website has great resources. There's, for example, there's this Adam Gordon pain recovery program, but they have lists of books, and they have forums to talk to other people. And I think that's really important too, just to have a network of people who are going through what you're going through, and to see people who have gotten better is critical. So there's a lot of information you can do on your own. And I know even, reading a book was hard for me at the beginning, and I'd lie down, I'd have to prop it up, and I couldn't even read for too long. But when I realized I had to do something because the doctors weren't able to help me, that's what I did. And that's when I started to understand and learn all this. So mind-body connection is really critical in my opinion. But then all these other things, there's body work, psychology-based treatments and therapies, movement activities and treatments, and then self-care, all these things that, for anything, we should be doing all these things to just to keep us healthy, rest, exercise, doing creative things, writing or journaling, just getting emotions out, having social support. All this stuff is going to help your health in any case, but it really has helped supplement these other things that I've done to help me heal. And then there are a lot more integrated programs these days compared to when I first hurt my neck in 2005. So it's encouraging to see a lot more integrative medicine and holistic medicine coming into play, but it's still got a long way to go, in my opinion. All right, so I think this is where I'll just make sure I'm not forgetting. Yeah, this is where I'll just stop for a minute and see if there are any questions on this healing aspect of my presentation. And it's okay, I'm gonna stop share. See if I can see.
So there was a question. Has this condition always been present in society, or have we not heard of this? Has it always been around, but we just dismissed it as something we could not explain?
Good question. A little bit of all of that. I think it's something that's always been there. I think we dismiss it a lot of times because it's almost so common that everybody, might have a tight muscle and a little knot here, and it is what it is. But when it gets to that point where it's this myofascial pain syndrome or a chronic myofascial pain, I think it's not recognized. I don't know. I honestly don't know, but I think part of it is that it's in your head kind of concept, where people think, well, I can't find something structurally wrong with you, so it must be you're making it up, or it's not that big a deal. But we know it is, because those of us who experience it and are debilitated by it know that it can be horrible pain, and it's real pain. But so it's just something that hasn't gotten the press essentially that it should, when a lot of people are suffering and they write it off as, we don't know what causes this. So you have pain here. Okay, we don't really know what that is. So kind of just pass you off is what happens. And in my opinion, whenever I hear that now, oh, we don't know what causes this, my first thought is, let's go to the mind body stuff, because there's so much literature out there now about that it starts to make sense. But I think once we start to recognize and not be afraid of the fact that our emotions and traumas and whatever can affect our bodies, that I hope that this becomes more of a known condition and situation, and that we can treat it. I don't know if that answered.
I have a I have a question. Now from I've followed famous fitness instructors and done like, like kind of like Jane Fonda videos and things
Mhm.
like that. And I've heard them mention with certain moves, the mind body connection. Is there anything you can think of, or maybe a beginner's guide, um, of exercises for someone to kind of grasp that? Like I've done, like, let's say, like belly dance, where they mention that a lot. Can you think of something that where maybe someone's trying to figure out how to get started in
Oh, that's
developing that?
yeah, that's a really good question, because I came from it after the fact that I was too far gone, so more from even a preventative kind of thing. But yeah, dance is a good thing. Even I took some Martha Graham dance classes, and she's really, it kind of captures more of the mind body stuff. So there are certain, um, yeah, I honestly don't, I'm not familiar with enough things to give a good answer right now, I don't think. But yoga, a lot of yoga. I tried that when I was in a lot of pain, and it was hard for me to do. So I haven't gotten back to that. I like qigong and tai chi. Actually, qigong is something really very easy to do if you are experiencing any pain. That's something I think is a good start to. It's very gentle, but it really, I don't know. It has that mind body aspect to it. And like I said, yogas and different dances. I'm trying to think of and stretching, just gentle stretching. Myofascial stretching is not. I was a gymnast. I'm like, let's go in there and get it all stretched out, but it's much gentler and slower, and you have to just get to a little barrier where there's a little tension, and just wait. You can wait 5 minutes sometimes, just to slowly let everything start to uh, release. So it's that fascia. It's not just the muscles you're trying to pull and stretch. It's letting that outer layer have time to start to release. So on a regular basis, this is something we should all do, really, I think, just to keep us more supple and not letting all the tension of any day get to us and start to restrict us. So those are just some ideas I have off the top of my head.
Okay. And then we have a comment in question. How terrible. I think especially women endure pain without real efforts to resolve it. Um, Integrative and alternative treatments can be life-saving in more ways than one. How is your pain now, and do you still have to work on your mind-body connection?
Yeah, very good point. I agree. The integrative and alternative treatments can be life saving, and women are more, seems more likely to be not believed or
Mhm.
just passed off, and it is tragic actually. And as far as my pain, it's I would say average. Like right now, it's not bad. I think I average between 1, 2 to 4, and it varies throughout any particular day. Something can happen that I can't even explain that spikes it up. But because I understand this mind body connection, I I can't immediately sometimes make it go away. Recently, my hip, I don't know what happened. I literally don't know what I did. Um, but sometimes it's nothing. Sometimes it's something emotional that you don't even know are aware of. But whatever it was, for a couple months now, I'm hobbling. I'm kind of not able to move too well. So I try to incorporate everything I've learned. Slow down, but don't give into it. Don't be afraid to move, because that's just fear feeding it. So still continue to move. But then after a couple months and it still wasn't resolving, it was getting a little better. I went to the myofascial release therapy, and in a couple days, it really just dramatically brought that down. So I know what to do with it, um, and I don't really do the work on the mind body connection on a daily basis per se. It's not like I have a practice necessarily, but it's so ingrained in me now that I understand it, that I think whenever something comes up, or even my neck spikes up, I just let it happen and I don't panic about it. And I think that's half the battle, because once we get into that mindset, oh my God, it's happening again. I'm not going to be able to do anything. You know, again, it's those fears and those panic feelings that perpetuate it. So I think the way I work on my mind body connection is just knowing it's under there, and it's driving things that happen to my body, and I don't fear it so much. And um, I let my body process what it needs to process, because I figure it's telling me something. It's telling me to slow down, to something happened that it didn't like, rest, relax, and um, and things seem to be okay that way. I'm like I said, I still have some pain. I still go on and off between trying new things. In that table where I had all the things that I've tried, I a lot of it was after I came back from paoli and I had great success, but I've tried EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. I think I might have said that backwards. Um, but that's for trauma, working with trauma. So I know there's still some things in me that are, I think, holding me a little bit in this pain. So, and it's hard to reverse, but I still work. Occasionally I'll go back and forth. There's something I tried a little bit of. I might try again this neurokinetic therapy. Again, retraining the brain and the body to move and in efficient and better ways, so that the pain doesn't get stuck. So that's my answer. Um, I think, should we go on to the next part? Were there
Sure.
any others?
She wanted to say thank you so much for sharing your story. She fell recently and broke her elbow about a month in. Um, she starts physical therapy and realizing that fear based on PTSD is preventing her from doing all the exercise fully. Um, that will help her heal. So yeah, fear and other emotions can be powerful, and we have to pay attention to that.
Yeah, and just start slow, really, really slow, because yeah, your body, even if your body can handle it at some level, it's still scared no matter what. You have to slowly get out of that kind of PTSD fear aspect of it, and but just tell yourself that your body is healing physically. It knows how to heal. You just got to get your mind to understand that and follow through.
And I had one question too.
Mhm.
I how I feel like you had to find the information for the myofascial yourself and bring it to your doctor. So is it typically um difficult for people to start this type of treatment, or just once you bring it to your doctor's attention that you think this is the right course for you, then it's kind of a little bit easier?
That's a really good question. It's hard for me to say. I know my own experience, and but I think I don't know. I think a lot of doctors still are just trying to give you the surgery or the shots or the medication. I mean, I know medication is a big controversy now anyway, so maybe they're trying to avoid that more now. But it depends on the doctor. And like I said, if you don't feel like you're getting good support from the doctor, find another doctor. Because yeah, I still had to find this out on my own to begin with, and he was amenable. He said he saw it was helping, so he would continue to give me the prescriptions for the physical therapy. Um, but it's hard when you have to find it on your own. And again, this may not be the specific thing for everyone, but um, yeah, it's I think it's still hard. It's still a barrier to get the right information. And if you can look for a doctor who has an understanding of integrative medicine and the mind and body, you're starting out in much better shape. Yeah, somebody's saying some doctors don't look outside the box, and that's so true. So yeah, it's unfortunate. And so that's my pitch, is to start in medical schools to make sure everybody is putting this into the curriculum. So at every level of every type of specialty needs to have this knowledge of how our body works as a whole, not as parts. So, okay. All right, we can still have more questions on those after maybe, but I'll go ahead and do the rest of the presentation just about my, oops, sorry, about, I'm trying to share screen and talk at the same time, sorry, about my writing process. So let's see if I can, oops, something's not working. Here we go. Okay, I was gonna ask, I can't see people, so I'll still ask if there's people out there who have written or are writing a book, 1, or 2, if they want to write a book, and then 3, if they have no intention to write a book, just like reading books, but don't want to write. So I was going to ask that because the answer for me is that I didn't grow up and didn't live life wanting to write a book. And this one just came at me because what happened through my journey. So I didn't have formal training in creative writing. I was a technical writer for my environmental science job. And I didn't really know what I was doing, but I just had this story that came out of me when I came back from Paoli and learned the things I learned about my own self and my life and my body. I just felt compelled to write it down. 1, so that I could understand my own story. And also it was cathartic, and it wasn't that I went out thinking I'm going to do this to, for catharsis, but it definitely was a process that helped me through the healing process. And it kept me a little sane because I did end up having to quit my job, leave my career, which was pretty devastating. And to have the writing for me was really kept me sane and using my brain still, and that was really important to me. But also ultimately I wanted to help others because after living through such pain and misery, you just don't want anyone to ever have to suffer like you might have. So I wanted to reach out to pain patients and trauma survivors and tell my story so that I could be a voice for those who aren't ready or can't or may never will be able to speak about theirs. And I was hoping that would help somebody. And I wanted to write this as a book because I wanted to describe the journey, because coming from point A to point B, where, ruptured disc, injured neck, miserable pain, to this place where I understood the trauma, past trauma was related to it and everything just seemed crazy. So I had to explain this step by step so that the skeptical people like me at the beginning can come to the same conclusion I did and see through my experience that this is not wacko woo-woo stuff. It's real, and it's the way it is, and you can heal once you get this. You can heal better. And then finally, I was also read about people who had written their books and got better after that. So I still had in the back of my mind, this was going to get that last bit of pain taken care of, and if I could share my story. Let me see. I'm just looking at the one person is writing a book, and one's not. Okay. Two love reading. Okay, I'm going to move on. Oh, sorry, having problems with this. Okay. As far as the actual writing process, I started writing when I was in Paoli. When I left for Paoli, my physical therapist, had suggested that I take a notebook with me because maybe there'd be something worth writing. I never journaled before. I never had a diary. I think I was given one as a child, and I might have filled out 2 days, but I didn't do that. I did like to document things. As my scientist, I documented every time my child, fed when she was born, and every step she took and every word she said, but or they said. But I didn't journal about my feelings or anything like that. So I brought the journal to Paoli, and crazy things started happening, or just this mind-body connection stuff was coming clearer to me, and I thought it was kind of wild. So I started writing down everything that was happening. And then after that last day, when kind of my world blew apart, and my pain came way down, then I just knew I had a whole story to tell. And my life was starting to make sense now. Some things that I never thought of before kind of related to where I ended up in pain, at age 40. So it was an intriguing and interesting story to me. So I started writing it. I would work, I would write between when my kids were in school. I had to make this my lowest priority because even when I stopped working because I was barely able to manage taking care of the kids, keeping my marriage alive, and managing my pain. So that was my priority, especially, keeping the kids alive. And so I would just lie down when they were in school. I'd be lying down anyway to rest my neck so I could write in notebooks, and then I could spend a little time as I would getting a little better, transcribe it on the computer, then go back to bed, print it out, edit. So I did a lot of back and forth between the bed and the computer over months and months and years of time. So I didn't give myself any deadline because like I said, I had to make this a lower priority, but at the same time, I was still possessed to write practically. So it was just pouring out of me. Anytime I had a chance, I would be writing, and I didn't give myself any deadlines so that I could. I just couldn't put pressure on myself because I knew by then that that was not healthy for me to do. I'd lived my life already doing that through everything else I had done up until I ruptured the disc at age 40. So that I knew wasn't healthy. So I just had to give myself a break and do it at whatever pace it was going to happen. And like I said, the words were just coming out of me. I wouldn't call it a first draft, but the first I guess all the journals together were about 500,000 words. Now, just to give you an idea, that's about 1,000 single space pages, and about 6.5 times the length of my final book. So I had a lot of words to work with, and so once I got it into a real story, I had it down to about 375,000 words, which is about 750 single space pages. So it was huge and ridiculous. So I got it down a little farther. I showed it to Phil at one point, and he said, "Maria, that's good, but it's good for a first draft." And this was about 5 or 6 years in. So I was like, a first draft? I've been working on this for years. Nonetheless, I got it down to, well, before I brought it to an editor, she said she wouldn't look at it till it was 90,000 words. So I got it down to the 90,000. And ultimately it was 77,000 in the final cut. But yeah, I just had to revise and condense a lot. Like I said, I didn't have formal training in creative writing. So I just learned as I went. I kept reading other books and read some how-to books and just kept revising it till it sounded like it was clear. And I had to kind of change my technical style of writing into more of a creative style, which was fun to do and interesting and a little challenging. But and like I said, I finally got some editors, and I did at the end join a couple of writing groups. At first I thought I would never do that because the last thing I had time for was having to write anything extra. And I thought when you join a group, they'll give you a prompt and you'll have to write something. And that I didn't have time for because I had plenty of words. I couldn't take time to write anything else, but I wanted to just hone my skills on what I had written. But when I did join the group, it was very affirming and made me feel like, people are interested in what I'm saying. So it did give me some encouragement to move forward. Oh, sorry. So then I had to decide whether I was really going to publish this or not. So I had this all written, and I still went back and forth, not sure if I could do it. I felt like I had to do it. I wanted to help others. I wanted to, show that I had to get this stuff out because it was holding things in, holding, these secrets in, or whatever it was physically hurting me. So I just wanted to get that out for me. I wanted to help others. And then on the other side of the coin, I felt like I couldn't. Here I am. I'm disabled. I shouldn't be able to do anything. And then I was most worried about what it could do to some other people. And there were some sensitive topics here, and I was very, very concerned about that. I thought about writing under a pseudonym or making it fiction, but that just didn't seem genuine because a lot of what I was saying was about speaking your truth, and if I was hiding behind a name or fiction, that didn't feel right. So I ultimately went forward. I did get essentially permission from the person I was most worried about hurting. I got the go ahead. So that was huge. and I went forward, and I ended up publishing. I actually self-published the book. At about that 6-year point, I had sent out some query letters to literary agents, and I got a couple of positive feedback, but they said, well, no thanks, but not bad. And now I look back, it wasn't ready to go there at that point. It took another 6 years before I got my final version, and now I see that that's when I probably should have done that, but I didn't at the end decide to go with an outside publisher or a literary agent, because I didn't want to spend any more time. It was already 12 years into this, and it was time to get this out. And I didn't want to also be on anybody else's schedule, because I was still managing pain and life, and I didn't want to be set into somebody else's schedule and have to work, because I know myself well enough. I work too hard sometimes. So when I had my job, I would always, want to do such a good job that I overworked. And I knew if I got myself into a situation like that with a publisher, it wouldn't be good for me. So I knew I could do it on my own pace if I self-published. So now that I had, every time this poll keeps jumping up, I'm sorry, I'm having trouble. So finally I was ready to go, and I had to find a title. I had a working title for a long time that was Defying Gravity, and thought it was perfect as a gymnast. And then I conquered all this stuff, and but right before I was going to publish it, I looked that title up again, and several more books had been published with the same title. There had been some before I knew about. I thought it was okay, but there were several that had just come up, and I thought, oh, it is a little cliche, and there's too many other books with the same name. So I started on a search for a new title, and I engaged anyone I knew or ran into to help me, and either they were taken or they were just silly. All these titles I kept trying to come up with. Here I was doing some mock-up of the covers. What's Feeding the Pain? A 200-pound head. More and more that we couldn't come up with. Starting to lose my mind, thinking of everything I could. More covers. And finally, 122 titles later, yeah, I wrote them all down. I was walking my dog one day, and it came to me. I said, The Invisible Key, Unlocking the Mystery of My Chronic Pain. So I'm calling people, all the people that I had driven crazy, trying to help me. And I said, I got it, The Invisible Key. And they said, what does that mean? And I said, well, you'll just have to read the book. But 12 years after I began writing my saga, I finally finished and published my memoir. So my final words are, for both writing and healing, to never give up. So I will end it there. And I've got, this is just my contact information. I'll just leave up here for a bit while I'll entertain questions. And feel free to contact me, the email healingfromchronicpain@gmail.com. You can send me direct questions, or I've got a website, healingfromchronicpain.com. Yeah, so you can contact me any of these ways, and I will say, are there any questions?
And I can unmute people if you like, or people can raise their hand, or they can put questions in the Q&A, or chat, whatever they feel comfortable. So I guess maybe I'll do allow talk in case people want to talk. I know you answered my question of the title, because I thought it was a really good title. So I was curious about that.
If you don't have any, oh, somebody has a question.
I have a question. Do you think that it was necessary for you to go through everything that you went through initially for you to be open to accepting the mind-body connection? Or do you think somebody could just go straight to that without having to go through what you went through?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. And I've thought of about this a lot. And I feel like I probably did have to go through that. Sadly, I don't know, if somebody had come to me earlier, I would hope that I could have been open to it, but I don't know. And maybe it wouldn't have taken 2 years. Maybe, if somebody had come, if I'd gotten this information a little earlier, but I do feel like at some level, again, sadly, if our society already knew this stuff, the doctors, the people, everybody just accepted this, this may not be the case. But for me, I feel like I had to go that traditional route to then be ready to look at something else. But again, my hope is that we switch from that. We can all switch from that, and as the more of us speak about these healing methods that we've come through and been able to heal, that we don't have to go through surgery or go through the shots and things that aren't really helping. They're band-aids. It's okay, and I'm not saying medications are bad necessarily. When it's an acute situation or at the beginning when you have to calm things down, sure, but that's not the final solution. So if that helps you get some relief to then go do this other stuff, that's important too. But yeah, I think it's a good question. I'll never know the answer for me, but I at some level I do think I sort of had to go through some of this to get to the accepting point of what I needed to be to really heal.
So I have a question. So I feel like you're probably the type of person who's inclined to doing research because you were the one who came to your doctor with um, the diagnosis in the first place and the type of treatment. So was there a special type of research also required in writing this book, or any kind of research that was helpful in writing this book?
Yeah, most of it obviously was just my story, so it was from my head of what I experienced. But I did do a lot of research, like you said, just about myofascial pain, and all that started not even intending for the book, just for me to understand what was going on with me. But I did, and it wasn't like, I also tended to go, after a while I was looking at scientific articles and doing things like that just to further my knowledge. But that wasn't what I needed really to, even for the book or for my own knowledge. It was general books out there on myofascial pain. And like on my website, I have a list of resources of the things that helped me. And there are a lot of just, going on Amazon and finding books and just reading. I just kept reading as much as I could. And I was learning. So first it was the John Barnes and the John Sarno books, but there's other books by The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk, a lot of trauma related issues there too. But just so I just kept reading on anything I could find about mind body connection type of thing. And there is a lot out there. And that helps me too, because I did try to explain a little bit more than just this is my story about what myofascial pain is and the mind body connection, as far as how I understood it, just from a not a very technical standpoint, even just to try to explain it in a general sense. But so that's what I did. I just read a lot of just general books out there on the topics.
I do want to read the comments before I ask anything else. Um, there's a comment. I have notes I have made through my journey, which I tend to sort and share with my GP surgery to help spread the word about MPS. And then thank you, Maria. So clear, informative, helpful, and hopeful. And then again, thank you for sharing your story. I did want to say what you read was very vulnerable, and it made me want to ask, was there were there other difficult scenes or vulnerable scenes to write, and was there an emotional impact of writing the book?
There are definitely emotional, difficult things to write, more so than what I shared. And it wasn't really, I don't even know that it was difficult to write. It was pouring out of me. It was something that had to come out, I think. So for me, I didn't even have time to think about it. It, it was, it was tough. And I would go back and reread stuff and I'd be crying just reading it, you know, thinking about it again and not even realizing that I was still, you know, so affected by it. But I think that was part of the healing process too, honestly. And so it wasn't, I never stopped myself from doing it. I didn't say, oh, this is too hard, I can't do this. Again, I think I got to the point in my life at 40 when it all just blew up and I was in this excruciating pain. And this was the only thing that was going to save me, essentially. So I just kind of, almost like I said, or wrote in here, I was almost possessed and it was just coming out. So it was difficult. And even after, so when people have read the book after, and I feel I'm very removed from that now. I'm not so vulnerable with it. And because like I said, that was 5 to 10 years ago, or 10 to 15 years ago when I was going through most of what I wrote. So, and now it's more matter of fact, and which is really, what's the word? I can't think of the word. Just freeing that I can now talk about these things and read them or whatever, and they're not so devastating anymore. So I think that was a lot of what is helpful about writing.
And then we have the question, how much has psychotherapy helped you along the way?
So psychotherapy has helped me a lot. And I tend to say it didn't so much because I always say, oh, that didn't bring down my pain immediately. And when the myofascial pain did, the myofascial release did, and that was, you know, kind of combining, like like I read, they do some dialoguing with you and it gets into mind and body together. So I always think, oh, the psychotherapy didn't help, but it really did help me process traumas, things that I didn't realize. So I was doing it in tandem. I was doing myofascial release and psychotherapy, and I got a little tired of it because I feel like my brain still knows how to protect me and think it's protecting me by not going places. So I can divert attention through my mind much easier than I can when somebody's working on my body. That just comes up. So I feel like the body work for me is more effective, but definitely I came to learn things through the psychotherapy that were helpful in me processing trauma. And let me just add to there, I've done straight talk therapy, but some things with psychotherapists like the EMDR and the somatic experiencing. These are some other things, other techniques that work with the body a little bit more than just talking, but it's a little bit more talking versus the myofascial release body work. So some combination of those I find very effective as well.
And then I want to ask if you have any tips for other people who may have chronic pain and also for other writers.
Yeah, for other people with chronic pain, I've covered a lot of this, but I guess I have about 5 or 6 things in my head. See if I can remember. First rule out, go to a doctor and rule out any underlying, cancer, broken bone, other diseases or illnesses that might be causing the pain. But again, be careful for if a doctor says that you've got a bulging disc, that doesn't mean. There are a lot of people who have bulging discs and no pain. So there are some things that doctors tend to say, and a lot of people tend to believe are the cause, but they're not really. So it's a tricky balance. So again, back to finding a doctor who is more holistic is important. Learn about the mind-body connection and seek out mind-body informed treatments and non-invasive ones I would start with, because like I said before, there's less damage you can do from a non-invasive treatment. And there are a lot of cheap things like reading books and therapy is going to cost, but you can start there. Then just slowly starting to move slowly again back to that, not being fearful of doing anything. So, but just start real slow and trust your body, but don't overdo it. And if you do, that's okay. You're going to have setbacks. That's all right. It happens, but just keep moving forward and don't be afraid. Practice self-care, all those good things we know. Take care of yourself in terms of resting and just trying not to overstress your life. I know it's hard. The pandemic maybe have shown people that there's a different way to do things. So maybe that'll help. I don't know. And then find a support network. Just I found that even the myofascial release therapy that I was doing, there was an online group of people there, and those forums, like I said, on that TMS wiki site, you can get to talk to people, and it really helps just to hear other people's stories and talk to people who know what you're going through and can empathize. And you know, keep an open mind, never give up, like I said, and be easy on yourself, and just know that we have the capacity to heal. I guess those are in a nutshell.
And then for any
Writing.
writers who also
Yeah.
want to share their stories.
Yeah. So yeah, I would say just write it. Just do it. Even if, like, for me, I didn't think of myself as a writer, and it was it all came out good. You know, it's a story that people that's helping people. So I say write it, and even if you're scared and you don't know if you're going to do it, just keep writing, because that process is freeing and healing and worthy of your time, I think. And then yeah, and you can do it, because if I could publish a book, you know, with no knowledge of this, I do like to research, like you said, so I had to go and figure out how to do a lot of it. But there are places you can go to get a lot of assistance as well. But I would say just start writing and don't be afraid. And if you are, just keep going.
And then I also want to ask, do you have any current projects or even goals? I mean, you said you were climbing a mountain.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm sure you got some current goals.
Yeah, you know, as far as physically, I don't even so much, because I'm at a point where I still have some pain come and go, but I don't feel like I'm restricted so much by it. Like I did change my life. My life is different. I'm not doing gymnastics, and I'm not working full time and crazy life. And my kids are now out of the house, so I can have a much calmer life. So I don't have any goals that I feel like, because I need to reach this. I just feel like I can do what I want to do. So that's nice. But as far as writing, I still have, I wrote so much, like I said, and I have a lot written that the 4 books worth of stuff that I took out of my book, I'm compiling to decide how and if I can put that into another book. So I guess that's my goal, to keep writing. I enjoy it. It turns out I feel like that's my replacement for my gymnastics outlet. That was my creative and physical expression. Now I walk and do qigong and stuff for movement, but for the creative and intellectual stuff, I do enjoy the writing. So.
Well, I want to thank you for your time and for this informative presentation and for sharing your wonderful story, and for all of the lovely patrons for coming. And yeah.
All right, well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.